From the day I moved into this house, the HOA made it clear that I was not welcome. The problem for them? My property wasn't part of the association. I didn't owe them anything. I didn't have to follow the ridiculous rules they made up, and, above all, I didn't pay the abusive fees they charged other residents. This was an affront to the woman who ran the HOA as if she owned the neighborhood. From the moment I set foot in the neighborhood, she tried everything to get me to play her game. At first, it was just minor annoyances, letters and pamphlets informing me about the benefits of being a member of the HOA, insistent invitations to meetings, messages about the need to maintain the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. I threw it all away. Then came the direct complaints, telling me that my lawn was devaluing the neighborhood, or that the paint on my fence didn't match the community standard. Still, I ignored them. Then the letters changed tone. Your home is under evaluation for compliance with HOA guidelines. We are concerned about the appearance of your property. There have been reports that the house looks empty. With each new attempt at intimidation, my certainty that this woman was a lunatic only increased. But I never imagined that she would have the courage to take things too far. That afternoon, on my way home from work, I found a car parked in the driveway and a couple watching my house. The woman was analyzing the structure with a satisfied smile, while the man was working on a tablet. I stood there for a moment, watching them without understanding. Whatever was going on, it couldn't be good. As soon as I got out of the car, the woman turned around with a friendly smile, as if she recognized me. "Hi, are you from the real estate sector? We came to see the house before we closed on the purchase." The phrase kept echoing in my head. My brain froze for a few seconds, unable to process the information. House? Buying? My house? I tried to laugh it off, hoping it was a big misunderstanding. But the man, sensing my confusion, turned the tablet towards me and continued as if he were talking about the weather. "Everything is fine with the paperwork. The HOA has already assured us that it's an abandoned property. The document of sale was signed this week. The image on the tablet showed my house listed as available for sale under the responsibility of the HOA, and right there, at the bottom of the document, was the name of the woman who ran the association, signing as if she were the real owner of the property. My head throbbed. My whole body was hot with anger. I took a deep breath so as not to rip that tablet out of his hands and throw it on the floor. That woman had finally crossed the line. I could have laughed at the letters, ignored the notes, carried on with my life as if she didn't exist. But now she had tried to tear me away from my own home. I went in like a hurricane, pulling out drawers and going through files until I found what I needed. My name was still on the documents. The deed, the registration, everything was there, proving that I was still the rightful owner of that house. But the HOA had somehow managed to place an ad for sale, as if the property was empty. They hadn't just disrespected me, they had committed a crime. My heart pounded as I grabbed all the papers and left the house determined. I wasn't going to wait to see how far this woman would go. If she wanted war, then war she would have. The HOA wanted to kick me out of the neighborhood, and this time they had gone too far. It was no longer about nagging or petty attempts to pressure me. They had signed a false document, put my house up for sale, and tried to erase me as if I had never existed. Worst of all, they did this without a shred of fear of the consequences. They really thought I was going to accept this quietly. With the documents in hand, I got into the car and drove straight to the HOA office. The small building in the center of the neighborhood was further proof of the money they sucked out of the residents, with its impeccable facade and perfectly trimmed garden. I parked without even bothering to close the car door properly and walked in like a storm. The receptionist looked up from her computer with an automatic smile, but her expression changed when she saw my face. "I need to speak to the president of the HOA. Now." She hesitated, opening her mouth to say something, but the tone of my voice left no room for argument. After a few seconds of uncomfortable silence, she got up and went to a door at the back. disappearing for a moment before reappearing with the woman I wanted to see. She came out with that same arrogant air as always, as if she was already prepared to dismiss any unimportant complaint. But this time, the game was different. Her eyes flashed with a brief moment of surprise when she saw me there, but she quickly regained her pose, crossing her arms as if she were bored. "Oh, how nice of you to come. We were just trying to get in touch with you about the situation at your house." I wanted to laugh. She was really pretending that it was all just a little misunderstanding, as if she hadn't committed a complete fraud by trying to sell my house under my nose. I wasted no time. I threw the documents on her desk and waited while she looked through the sheets, her eyes narrowing as she understood that her plan hadn't worked. "You don't have any rights to my house." My voice came out low, full of restrained anger. "That document you signed is a fake, and you know it. You listed a property that doesn't belong to you and tried to sell it without my permission. That's not just dishonest. It's a crime." She put down the papers and stared at me, her expression completely closed. Her once confident posture now seemed rigid, as if her own body was trying to decide whether to back down or continue pretending to be in control of the situation. "There was a miscommunication," she said, her voice more careful now. "Some houses were under review for neighborhood maintenance, and there was a misunderstanding about your residence. We were just trying to ensure that the neighborhood remained valued. If she thought she could get away with this ridiculous excuse, she was sorely mistaken." I tried to control myself, but I let out a dry laugh, completely incredulous at the woman's audacity. She was pretending that this was an administrative matter, as if she had the right to analyze my house and decide for herself what to do with it. "There is no miscommunication. You tried to sell my house as if I had disappeared. You made up a document, listed the property without my consent, and signed fraudulent papers. If this was just a misunderstanding, I would have received a notice, not found people on my doorstep saying they had already bought the property." She opened her mouth to argue, but kept quiet. Perhaps she had realized that there was no plausible justification. Perhaps she was calculating what the next step would be. But one thing was certain. She wasn't used to being confronted like this. The silence between us lasted long seconds. She looked away, picked up the papers again and looked through them quickly, as if trying to find some detail that she could use to her advantage. But there was nothing there to change the fact that she was trapped. "We can resolve this in a civilized way," she said at last. "There's no need to make it a bigger problem than it really is. It was almost funny. First they try to rob me, now they want to play diplomat." I took the papers back and leaned slightly over the table, looking straight into her eyes. "You've already made it a problem. Now you'll have to deal with the consequences." I turned my back and left the office without waiting for any more lame excuses. I already knew exactly what I needed to do. The HOA wanted me out of my own house, so I was going to make sure that this woman never had the power to try that with anyone again. I left the HOA office certain that this woman wasn't going to give up so easily. People like her don't accept losing. They always think they have a way of coming out on top, even when they're already up to their necks in their own mistakes. But if she thought I was just going to let it go, she was very wrong. She tried to sell my house, fudged documents, and still had the audacity to act as if it was a simple administrative error. But now, I knew I had to act fast. If she was capable of trying something like this once, I had no doubt that she would do it again if she thought she could get away with it. On the way back, my mind was already formulating a plan. I could go straight to the police, file a formal complaint, and let the process take its legal course. But the problem was that things like that took time. The HOA was an organization full of bureaucracy, and, while everything was being looked into, this woman would still have room to continue her manipulations. So, before anything else, I needed to expose what she had done. I started with the neighbors. If the HOA managed to put my house up for sale, it was because many residents believed the lie that the property was abandoned. I needed to make sure everyone knew the truth. I started going door to door, explaining the situation. Some people's initial reaction was shock. Others laughed, thinking I was exaggerating, but all it took was to show the documents for the expression of disbelief to turn to anger. It didn't take long for me to realize that I wasn't the only one who had problems with the HOA. One neighbor said he received constant notices about the unsuitable state of his garage, even though he had never violated any neighborhood rules. Another mentioned that he had received absurd fines for ridiculous reasons, such as leaving his car parked on the street for more than one night. Some started talking about fees that no one really understood, about how the woman from the HOA seemed to create new rules out of thin air, and how no one could ever challenge anything without being threatened with more fines. The situation was worse than I thought. The HOA wasn't just trying to kick me out. They had been sucking money and control out of the entire neighborhood for years, and no one ever had the guts to really stand up to them. It was exactly what I needed. After talking to at least 15 residents, I realized that the story was already starting to spread. People who had previously avoided discussing the HOA were now talking to each other, gathering stories, asking questions. When I returned home, I received several messages from neighbors asking for more details, wanting to know how it had happened. But I wasn't finished yet. If this woman wanted to turn my house into a secret negotiation, I was going to let the whole neighborhood know about it. The next day, I made a post in the neighborhood community group. I posted a photo of the fraudulent sale ad, attached the official documentation proving that I was still the rightful owner, and told the story as it happened. I explained how I came home and found strangers saying they had bought my property, how I went to the HOA office, and the woman tried to minimize everything as if it were a simple misunderstanding. It didn't take long for the post to blow up. Comments started pouring in within minutes. Residents who already hated the HOA took the opportunity to share their own stories. People who had never said anything before were now furious, demanding explanations. Some even asked if it would be possible to sue the HOA as a group, since their abuse was clear. That's when I realized that I didn't have to fight this war alone. One of the messages I received was from a local lawyer, someone who had dealt with disputes against HOAs before. He said that if I wanted to sue, he could help structure a case, especially since there were fraudulent documents involved. And the best part? After the post spread, other residents offered to testify against the HOA, claiming that they had also suffered administrative abuse over the years. Now I had evidence, witnesses, and a lawyer interested in the case. What the HOA thought would be simple theft, disguised as bureaucracy, was about to become a nightmare for them. The only thing left now was to see how this woman would react when she realized that, for the first time, she wasn't the one in control. The HOA always thought they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. For years, they had imposed absurd rules, charged unjustified fees, and used every bureaucratic loophole possible to maintain control over the residents. But this time, they had gone too far. They tried to sell my house, forged documents, and now that the story was spreading, they were desperate to keep the situation under control. Over the next few days, the neighborhood became a real battleground. The community group in which I published my story exploded in revolt. People who had previously just murmured in dissatisfaction were now furious and demanding answers. Neighbors began gathering to discuss the HOA's fraud and all the petty injustices they had suffered over the years. The woman who ran the HOA tried to minimize the situation. First, she sent messages to the residents saying that it was all just a misunderstanding and that the HOA would never sell a house without following proper procedures. When she realized that no one was buying it, she started spreading the word that I was a problematic resident who was trying to harm the community with unfounded accusations. The problem for her was that I now had something she never had: proof. The lawyer who contacted me reviewed every document I had. He confirmed that what the HOA had done was illegal, and that not only could they be prosecuted for fraud, but also for falsifying documents and embezzlement. The neighborhood was organizing to testify against the administration. gathering testimonies from residents who had been victims of extortion disguised as fees and fines. It was then that the HOA made its last desperate attempt to silence me. One evening, an envelope appeared on my doorstep. It was an official notice from the HOA, informing me that I was being fined $5,000 for disruptive behavior and spreading false information that damages the reputation of the community. The audacity was unbelievable. First, they tried to rob my house. Now they wanted to punish me for exposing the truth. I took the notice and went straight to the HOA office the next morning. This time, there was no receptionist to stop me. When I walked in, the woman was already there, sitting behind her desk as if she still had some control over the situation. She looked at me with what seemed to be a false calm, but her rigid posture and the way her hands were intertwined on the table gave away her nervousness. She tried to maintain her pose as if she wasn't feeling the weight of the revolt that was growing outside. "I'm trying to resolve this peacefully, but you keep inflaming the neighborhood," she said, sliding the fine papers across the table. "I don't know if you've noticed, but you're only making the situation worse for yourself." I picked up the papers and looked at them for a second. Then, without saying anything, I tore them into pieces and threw them on the floor. Her face contracted in indignation. "You no longer have any control over this neighborhood." "I thought you already understood that," I said firmly. "This fine means nothing. What it means is that you falsified documents in an attempt to steal legally registered property. And now you're going to have to answer for that." She was silent for a long moment. For the first time, she looked genuinely worried. The HOA had always used threats to intimidate residents, but now they had nowhere else to run. The story was already too big to be hushed up. Other board members were beginning to realize that they were going down with it. Some had even tried to come to me discreetly to say that they didn't know about the fraud and had only followed orders. But it was too late to save any of them. That afternoon, the lawyer filed a formal lawsuit against the HOA, not just for trying to sell my house, but for all the abusive practices that had been documented over the years. The impact was immediate. The case gained local repercussions. The news spread, and residents of other neighborhoods began to share similar stories about fraud committed by homeowners associations. It was the beginning of the end for the HOA. With no support from the neighborhood, no money from the fees they had previously charged without justification, and now facing a lawsuit that could see them pay huge damages, the board members began to resign one by one. The woman, of course, was the last to go. She had to be forcibly removed when the HOA was officially dissolved months later. The last time I saw her, she was putting boxes into an old car, ready to leave the neighborhood she once ruled as if it were her own kingdom. Her face was tired, the arrogance was gone, and for the first time, she just looked defeated. The HOA no longer existed. My house has never been safer, and I made sure that no one would ever try to steal what was mine again. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.